The disturbing life of pharaohs in ancient Egypt is often hidden behind images of golden masks, towering pyramids, and divine power. But the reality was far more complex, exhausting, and often tragic. From the moment a future pharaoh was born, their life was no longer their own. They were believed to be living gods, earthly embodiments of Horus and later Osiris, which meant every action, word, and decision carried cosmic importance. This divine status brought immense pressure as the balance of the universe, known as Ma'at, was thought to depend on the pharaoh's ability to rule justly and perform sacred duties correctly. Any famine, flood failure, disease, or military defeat was seen as a sign that the pharaoh had failed the gods, placing unbearable psychological weight on their shoulders. Education for royal children was harsh and relentless, beginning at a very young age. They were trained in reading, writing hieroglyphs, mathematics, astronomy, military strategy, religious rituals, and diplomacy. Mistakes were not tolerated easily because imperfection in a divine ruler was unacceptable. Physical punishment was common in ancient Egyptian education, even for royalty, reinforcing discipline through fear and pain. Childhood for pharaohs was often short, as many ascended the throne while still very young, sometimes as children or teenagers, thrust suddenly into absolute power without emotional maturity or personal freedom. Daily life for a pharaoh was dominated by rigid routines and ceremonial obligations. From sunrise to sunset, the ruler was expected to perform rituals to honor the gods, oversee temple activities, receive officials, judge legal disputes, and issue decrees. Privacy was nearly non-existent, as servants, priests, guards, and scribes surrounded the pharaoh constantly. Even personal moments such as bathing, eating, or sleeping were regulated and observed, stripping away any sense of normal human existence. The pharaoh's body itself was considered sacred, which created disturbing restrictions. They could not touch certain objects, eat freely, or behave casually in public. Their clothing, posture, and speech were strictly controlled to maintain the illusion of divine perfection. Physical imperfections, illnesses, or disabilities were often hidden or ignored, sometimes with disastrous consequences. Medical knowledge in ancient Egypt, though advanced for its time, relied heavily on magic and superstition. Pharaohs suffered from untreated infections, dental diseases, obesity, arthritis, parasites, and genetic disorders caused by royal inbreeding. Many royal families practiced incest to preserve divine bloodlines, leading to severe deformities, weakened immune systems, infertility, and early death. Pain was a constant companion, yet showing weakness was forbidden. Pharaohs were expected to appear strong and eternal even as their bodies decayed. Political life was equally disturbing, filled with betrayal, assassination, and paranoia. Absolute power made the pharaoh a constant target for rivals, priests, generals, and even family members. Court life was dangerous and trust was rare. Poisoning, conspiracies, and secret plots were common, especially during times of transition between rulers. Many pharaohs lived in fear of being overthrown or murdered, leading them to isolate themselves or rule through cruelty. Some ordered mass executions or harsh punishments to maintain control, creating cycles of violence and resentment. Warfare was another brutal reality. Pharaohs were expected to be warrior kings who led armies into battle. Campaigns against neighboring regions were bloody and exhausting, often involving long marches through deserts, brutal sieges, and high casualty rates. Failure in war could destroy a pharaoh's reputation and legitimacy, while victory required extreme violence. Captured enemies were frequently tortured, enslaved, or executed in public displays meant to reinforce royal power. Even successful campaigns left deep psychological scars, as pharaohs were forced to witness death on a massive scale while maintaining the image of a triumphant god. Religious obligations added another layer of suffering. Pharaohs were the chief priests of Egypt, responsible for maintaining favor with hundreds of gods and goddesses. Rituals involved complex ceremonies, offerings, chants, and sacrifices that had to be performed precisely. A single mistake was believed to risk divine punishment for the entire kingdom. The fear of angering the gods was constant, especially during natural disasters. When floods failed or plagues spread, the pharaoh bore the blame, leading to anxiety and desperation. Some rulers increased temple construction and offerings to appease the gods, draining the state's resources and increasing pressure on the population. The building projects themselves were disturbing symbols of power and mortality. Pharaohs spent much of their reign preparing for death, commissioning tombs, pyramids, and funerary temples designed to ensure eternal life. These massive constructions required immense labor, often under harsh conditions. While modern views debate the extent of slavery, many workers suffered injuries, exhaustion, and death. The pharaohs' obsession with the afterlife overshadowed the present, as their legacy depended more on burial splendor than the well-being of their people. Ironically, despite their wealth, many pharaohs lived with constant awareness of death. They were surrounded by symbols of mortality, funerary texts, and rituals reminding them that failure in life would doom their soul in the afterlife. Even death offered no peace. The mummification process was invasive and extreme, involving the removal of organs, dehydration of the body, and wrapping in layers of linen. Pharaohs believed this was necessary to preserve the soul, but the process itself reflected a deep fear of decay and oblivion. Tombs were filled with objects, food, servants' figurines, and spells meant to serve the pharaoh forever, revealing anxiety about loneliness and survival beyond death. Despite all precautions, most royal tombs were looted, bodies desecrated, and treasures stolen, erasing the security pharaohs worked their entire lives to achieve. Social isolation was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all. Pharaohs could not form normal friendships or relationships. Marriages were political tools rather than sources of love, often involving siblings or close relatives. Emotional connection was secondary to power and lineage. Children were viewed as heirs rather than loved individuals, and many died young. Grief was suppressed because a god-king was not supposed to mourn openly. Loneliness followed pharaohs throughout their lives, surrounded by people yet deeply isolated by their status. In the end, the life of a pharaoh was not a life of freedom, happiness, or peace, but one of constant pressure, pain, fear, and isolation. Beneath the gold and glory lay human beings trapped by divine expectations, political violence, physical suffering, and an overwhelming obsession with death. Their lives were disturbing not because they lacked power, but because they had too much of it, and the price of being considered a god was the loss of a normal human existence.